Hola, hola, mis amigos. Welcome to the last of the lesson sietes. This is the third one, siete C, and I promise this is it. We've talked about preguntas a ton. So first it was what types of preguntas could we ask, open-ended, close-ended. Now, the second one we went through is it a como or a cuánto or a cuándo interrogative word that I need. This last one is a little bit of a step back to just make our sentences prettier. So a little bit of structure, a little bit of nerdy grammar. Hopefully you're in the right headspace for this. You do not necessarily need to have completed siete A and B to be here. You don't even really necessarily have to do this lección now. If you want to skip to some of the meatier topics that come in lección ocho, feel free. But if you're just trying to follow the process, let's just get going and take a look. So, seis cosas that I want to talk to you about today. I will keep this brief, especially given the fact that it's very grammar nerdy, which I know is nobody's favorite. So, in the six cosas that I'm going to tell you about, you'll see a couple examples that you can apply to sentences starting right now, things that you might already have known but are just reiterated, and some things that maybe you hadn't thought about. At the very end, al fin, we're going to go through some traducciones or some translations to make sure everything's making sense, and then we'll round it out. So, like I said, short and sweet. So, una cosa, and I started with what I find to be one of the more interesting ones, is I get this pregunta mucho about, do I need an article? Here's where it got nerdy already. Articles are el, la, los, las. Those are all the definite articles. This is way back to lección uno. So if this is a little fuzzy, no wonder, right? And then we got un, una, unos, and unas, which is the indefinite articles. These are the ones that we think about for a, and some, and English. Either way, they're describing a noun, and they have that gender and that plurality component like we've always used. But unas veces no es necesario. And I'm curious if you've ever been curious why that is. The reason is we need to know how set the quantity is, or if it's really tangible what we're asking for. Also, if it's a language, country, or profession, you do not need an article for it. So let's take a look at a couple examples, and maybe you've already come across this. Let's say you need the receipt that's being handed to you, or a receipt. Let's say you're making a purchase and they say, do you want it in an email format? You say, no, yo necesito el recibo, por favor. No, I need the receipt, please. And this is a set thing, the receipt that you and the store clerk are talking about. So it's pretty specific. That's why it's el. Now, down here, we could just say, yo quiero agua, because I'm not asking for a specific number of drops of agua, and I'm not asking for a bottle, or the bottle. I'm just asking for the concept. Have you ever said something like, yo necesito dinero? I mean, come on, we all have. I need money. I'm not going to tell you exactly how much money, because as we all know, it's a state of mind. It's not really a number or anything quantifiable. So there's no set quantity of the agua, of the dinero. If we're talking about Canada, tú eres de Canada, we're not going to say the Canada, just like we do in English. We don't add the unless the United States, the Philippines, the Cayman Islands, things like that. If it does have a the in English, we will also have it in el español también, and we will capitalize. I don't know why that's not. So, una cosa más that is teeny tiny is if we are adding a or de to the definite article el, okay? So if we have a, el, or de, el, certainly you've run across this before in reading or just in your studies, and it's al or del. So it becomes what's called a contraction, and it's not like a labor thing, okay? We only do this with these dos palabras en español. There are a billion. Okay, that's not accurate. There are many, many, many contractions in English, including don't, shouldn't, would, etc., right? Muchos. So aquí dice, yo voy al supermercado, because it is the male supermarket. A, el is too stilted. So we'll squish those together. Okay, número dos. Adjectives or adjetivos have to match the gender and plurality of your noun. I know you're rolling your eyes at me, okay? I can see you through the computer screen. However, how many times have we made this mistake? All of us humans have. So the American travelers are nice. We just have to make sure that we don't lose stamina and forget to make it americanos and simpáticos, because it's very common, and again, this is no shade, but it's very common to miss the S or to misgender things, especially when they're feminine, once or maybe even twice. So here we've put an adjective on travelers, and then we're also putting an adjective at the end of the sentence. We're doing it 2 times, and that happens on occasion. in a more complex sentence. Something like this, the expensive hotel, what's going to be el hotel first, then it'll be caro, okay? And if you're noticing this here, it's the location is in Mexico. That's why it's estar, in case you were curious. And it's not in the Mexico, it's just en Mexico, right? Professions as well. I don't think I gave an example up here. I know I'm jumping back, but if I say yo soy maestra, I'm also not including la maestra or una maestra. So just give this a read through. I'm just doing my overview as you know. Okay. And then, so we're doing our order, we're doing our masculine or feminine, singular and plural with all of our adjetivos. We're also doing the same thing with our articles. So there's gender everywhere is basically what 1 and 2 are telling us. Okay, número 3, I almost gave away just now that we put the adjetivo después. Okay, después del sustantivo is what we call this in Spanish, is for a noun as a sustantivo. So the long trip is the trip long. Strong drinks are the drinks plural, strong plural, right? Even though this one fuertes does not change gender, it still does want to become plural. However, sin embargo, there is an exception like el nuevo restaurante. We notice this with things like nuevo and primer and buen. Sometimes they even drop an O. Feel free to check out your textbook, Complete Spanish Step by Step, for some intro to this. In the first couple chapters, it's interspersed throughout that they're doing some of this order and where the adjectives go and why. So feel free to check into that. This is really just a high level. If you went ahead and just said el restaurante nuevo, I don't think it's a huge deal. The worst thing that could happen is it sounds maybe a little awkward 10% of the time, as opposed to if we go all American, all gringo on it, we'll say las fuertes bebidas, and that's not quite what we want to be doing. We might sound awkward 90% or 90% of the time. So stick with me, just do the 10% wrong, if anything. Número 4. You know this. Yo and tú and nosotros do not have to necessarily be written in front of your verb, but do you remember why? ¿Por qué? Because yeah, we know we skip it or that the native speakers are skipping it, but what's the lógica? What's the logic behind the skip? That's our pregunta, okay? The respuesta is that if you're envisioning your chart, if you have it in your mind and you're seeing the yo, the tú, the él, ella, usted, the nosotros, vosotros, right? If you're seeing all of those things, you're only seeing una opción or one option for the yo, the tú, the nosotros, and not to be forgotten is vosotros, even though I didn't write it here. Those are implied in a way, so you don't really need to include them. So I am tired. In English, we need the I. Pero en español, estoy cansada. Notice my gender, okay? We have tickets, tenemos, boletos, or tiquetes, if you know tiquetes. I don't have to do the nosotros. I only recommend it if you are into a really complex, kind of tricky oración or sentence, and you know you need to buy yourself some time. Like, let's say you just either A, don't have any idea what to say, or B, you're just having trouble translating your thoughts. Use a nosotros or a yo, kind of drag it out, slow your speed down, and buy yourself extra time in the conversation. It's kind of like in English when we go, well, you know, like just buy yourself the time without having to use filler words. Just use a semi-unnecessary word to buy yourself extra tiempo. Okay, let's look at número 5. So now we're looking at prepositions. Now, we have not done any feature on preposiciones up to this point, lección 7C. However, if you're a future reader, you're going to look into 12 if you want to skip ahead for a lección específicamente about preposiciones. If you're like, what is a preposition, English or Spanish? That would be like de, con, a, sin, para, por, right? All of those are preposiciones, some of which you've already run across. It's impossible not to, but I usually teach these más tarde or later on, since they are not the most important component of your sentence for being understood, right? We go with the biggest impact first. However, the whole point of número 5 here is just about the order. It's not about what the preposición is and how to use it. It's where are you putting it, okay? So, por aquí, en inglés. And this is actually una regla en inglés también. For those of you that are like, this is a silly little rule. No, this is a rule in inglés también, but you sound hilarious if you say, in what hotel are you staying? We would never do that. We would say, what hotel are you staying in? So in español, they actually do abide by this rule, which power to them, right? So, ¿en cuál hotel? te quedas. This is a reflexive verb. That's why that te is there. Just get you a little exposure to it, okay? But in which, or in what hotel, right? That's what we're looking for. Where are you from? This is one of the first frases that you learned when you were muy nuevo to the video library or to lessons. ¿De dónde eres? And the de actually has no real bearing on the question word ¿dónde? So it's really common for estudiantes to think that saying where is de dónde. That's not true. This is from where are you originally is kind of what it's asking for. De dónde eres. So bear that in mind when you're starting to ask more preguntas, which you are now prepared to do given lección 7A y 7B. When you do start posing a question, you're going to have a little forethought here, because if you arrive at the end of your oración, at the end of your sentence, and you want to just kind of add that preposition and drop the mic and walk away, the problem with that is that you're already in too deep. So you'll have to throw it at the end, because otherwise you'd have to start all the way back at the beginning and add it there. I personally do that sometimes. If I'm kind of thinking slower than I'm speaking, I'll have to go back. It's not the end of the world. No es el fin del mundo, but it definitely sounds strange to throw your preposition as an afterthought. Al fin. Okay. Número 6. When a verb is conjugate, you're like, oh, snooze fest. Okay, hold on. I'll translate the English for you. Okay, if you got a verb and another verb back to back, that's what I'm trying to say here, but I'm trying to sound fancy. Okay, you do not conjugate the second verb. Leave the second verb alone. When you have two verbs back to back, leave the second verb alone. Check it out. I want to eat dinner. Well, as we know, to eat dinner is its own verb. And that is the exact wording of the infinitive, right? If you see cenar in a textbook, it's going to say to eat dinner, because this is what's called an infinitive, okay? Grammar day, as I mentioned, we got prepositions, we got articles, we got all kinds of things. We got infinitivos. So this is an AR verb, cenar. I don't have to do anything. I can't do anything to this verb because it's already been said. Mi decisión, my decision to choose yo and then to conjugate querer in irregular into quiero takes care of the business of cenar. Nothing needs to be done except putting it in, just like in English. If you see the structure here, you kind of get that I is conjugating want. So I want, but then to eat dinner, there's no change in subject. There's no reason to make this harder than it has to be. So yo quiero, or just quiero cenar ahora. Okay. And then the second one. They need to leave. Well, here I need the ellos because per our rules above, I don't really know who ellos, rather, I don't know who's going with the necesitan until I see the ellos, but I know for sure who's going with the quiero, right? So here's the ellos necesitan salir. Oh, there's some de plus el, hotel. Okay, so in this case, they need, and then the to leave, you can see with the to, that's how it's a standard giveaway of an infinitive verb, is seeing to drink, to swim. To leave, salir. Ellos necesitan salir del hotel, to leave from the hotel. I know we don't say the from often in English, but it's hidden there. So take a pause here. And if those rules kind of came at you fast and furious, if you want to try un ejemplo, try an example of each, go back to the beginning of the video and try to write your own oración, your own sentence making the case for each of those. So maybe you want to write a sentence that uses a country name or a profession so that you don't have to use el or un or whatever it might be, right? And just go all the way down the line trying to create an example of each that somewhat mirrors the ones that I provided. If you're like, I got it, this is a review, repaso, just show me the sentences. No hay problema. As per usual, we've got 9 opciones, actually only 9, not 10, so one less than normal en español, and then entonces tenemos también en inglés. This is much harder, as we know, to do this way. Most of these you'll notice are preguntas up at the top, so you can kind of see the structure of our questions, right? Because when we're asking a question, as you already learned in the previous videos, we need to do the order backwards of the verb and the subject. But then we also have just a couple statements here. So I'm just going to pick at random, as I tend to do. You're going to fill in the rest with whatever time you can devote to this. But ideally, it'd be just as much time as you spent watching the video. So maybe doing an example of each of the 6 rules, just to make sure that those are cemented, and then filling all of these in. Okay, let's try número 5. ¿Quién es el guía del tour. There's the del again, they're everywhere. So quién, we're remembering our interrogatives. They're almost memorized at this point. I'm reading this as who is and here it's going to be tour guide. A little hack for you here that I didn't include because I didn't want to do a million yet. Only seis, is that it's the tour guide. So I'm going to do the guide of the tour. So we'll do that as well. If you've ever had clase with me, it says lección de español, which means Spanish lesson. They're two nouns that are being put back to back in the backwards order with a de in between them. So just be aware that you'll see that muchas veces. Who is the tour guide? So it's just una pregunta. Remember that this is an interrogative question, so you don't know what you're going to hear. It could be anything from yo, which means I am, to some name, to no tenemos un guía del tour. ¿Quieres serla? Is we don't have a tour guide. Do you want to be it? So you're just not prepared for whatever the respuesta is going to be because this is an open-ended pregunta. Hopefully you can point. Hopefully someone else will point if you're confused on un viaje. These are very trip-centric, by the way. I went with kind of a travel theme. So, ¿cuándo es la cena? Remember cena or cenar from up above? Possibly, possibly not. This is when is dinner. And la cena here, we will for meals of the day usually include the la, but I bet what you were just wondering is it quantifiable dinner? Do I really need to put an article there? And I like your style. I like the way you're thinking because those are the types of questions we want to be asking ourselves. Okay, let's get down to the more cosas difíciles. Okay, so I'm wondering about where you're scanning, you're going ATM, appetizer, woof, right? Lots of words we don't know. I'm going to take this one, okay, because it's un poco difícil. I'll highlight these as well as I usually do to let you know these are the ones we've already completed. This is your video companion. We'll have these filled in as a little bit of breadcrumbs for when you come back to this within, that's right, 48 hours, 24 horas, you're getting back to this material pronto, okay? All right. Is it just A, T, M, spelling out A and then T and then M? No, por supuesto que no. Of course not. That would be way too easy. This is based off of English's automatic teller machine or something. So Espanol has its own word and phrase entirely. So we're going to say el cajero, which is teller, automático. See where we're going with this? Now, question for you. ¿Es o está? And why, right? This never goes away. Ser en estar will either haunt you or happily accompany you wherever you go. It depends on your view of things. El cajero automático está, because it's located, even though it's not going anywhere, more than likely, it's not growing legs and running away. El cajero automático está al lado del hotel. Is it possible to get al and del this close together in this example? Apparently. Okay, so you're keeping in mind your ser en estar. You're seeing a lot of ser en estar as well. So if that is filling you with dread because you're like, oh man, that feels like a million years ago and I had it then, but I don't have it now. You know what to do. Go check that video out. Lección 3. Go check out your libro, capítulo 2. Plenty of practice for you all over the place. Okay, we're going to do uno más. So we did dos up here. We're going to do dos down here, and that's going to leave you with 16 on your own. Let's see. ¿Qué queremos? I'm going to take an easy one. We're going to do 17, and this one's going to be yo if you want it to be. I'm not going to do that, though. I'm going to prove the point of this sentence structure and say I don't need to do the yo. Viajo a Colombia, not the Colombia. There's no gender for this país. And then here's the tricky part. We have not done this preposition work yet, but if you did date and time already, lección 4, you probably saw that it's el jueves. So yo viajo a Colombia el jueves is on. So we say the Thursday, which is a bit extraño, a bit strange, I know. But okay, so we've got a couple filled in for you. We'll have that ready to rock by the time you get to this. Somehow close to succeeding on menos de 20 minutos, even though these videos do tend to run long, lo siento. However, hopefully you feel like you've got a couple new rules, tips, and tricks that you can apply that are going to make people see your Spanish as more fluent, more native, and less textbooky. So I know that a lot of the things I mentioned were incredibly textbooky, but if you can think of these reglas maybe 3 or 4 of them were new to you today, and try to aplicar or apply them to your oraciones or your conversaciones in the futuro. I think that's going to ayudar muchísimo. So give it a try all the oraciones that I provided. And if you haven't been working in the libro de texto up to this point, about capítulo 6, I'd say, is where we've kicked off and stopped doing the present tense in chapter 6 of Complete Spanish Step by Step. Might be a good time to get caught up, take a peek at some of those areas of El Libro that we haven't gotten to just yet. If this was just a review for you, feel free to throw in some different tenses, some fancy vocabulario, but still apply those same rules because they're the foundation. So, muchas gracias por escuchar y ver el video, y yo les veré pronto. I'll see y'all soon. Bye.